mention what we've already spent money on this year and everything like that. I just can't print out the report to get to you.
And somebody on an iPad waiting in, we suspect that, the Commissioner Hendren maybe phoning or patting it in, so.
Things are recording.
Mhm.
I'm trying to update them, please. Trust one source. Still don't have a commissioner on there unless somebody's on the 227 number.
No. As I say, we're suspecting that,
Sorry. Joe, you can come sit down here. Mr. They'll leave the seat right there.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, this whole thing hinges on you, Jimmy.
Right. Bear the weight of this world on my shoulder.
we are still quorum shy. Mm-hmm.
What are we gonna have for?
Four, yes. Mhm.
In person?
Present.
Counting Zoom.
Present
Yes.
counting Zoom. And everyone has, everyone except knows.
Yesterday, the Queen canceled a virtual meeting with her private counsel. And she was also reportedly described as
Interesting.
You realize they were
earlier this week. In fact, many people since that event have talked about how frail she was. So,
England is, I think, some hospice right now. The hospital.
Oh, Lord.
Under medical.
So you think that's hindering on the iPad?
just called me and got the link. Here he is. So I kept having to go run back, but it calls for link.
Gotcha.
So everybody calls for it, she was meeting to.
Okay. Hmm. Is there any way to ding the iPad and see if that is? No. Mhm. We have a whole division moving out of the building to the floor above us, and so we've been getting that for a while now. It's a little like what was it, Sense Around in movie theaters back 30 years ago or so. You too can feel an earthquake.
I thought they might have relocated the railroad track a little closer.
I wouldn't mind that. I lived a long time alongside the main line of the UP, and there are a few things more comforting to me than a train going by. Unfortunately, I also go to sleep when that happens, so it's probably a good idea we've got them across the parking lot.
That's what she's done here. Should I just tell them to contact afterwards and I can identify for them, or
Well, is everyone gonna introduce themselves before we get started?
suppose that because the three commissioners are right there.
Okay, if you wanna tell them that we Everyone should introduce themselves, but if you have any questions, just to let us know. We'll tell them who is who.
Of course, if he's listening, he just heard that too.
Good point.
Let's make sure it's all heard on all levels. Keep track of who's sitting there.
Mhm.
Work.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
Nobody in the waiting room. Okay. You have to record that 5 after recording time. So
5 after by my watch as well.
4th.
All right.
All right.
Nice to see you.
Sorry, parking.
Understand. Welcome to our world. Michael?
Okay.
Shall we begin?
Yeah. You ready, April?
There you are.
All right, call the September meeting, the Arkansas History Commission to order. Let the record show we have a quorum of commissioners. First order of business is to review and approve the minutes of the June meeting of the commission. All commissioners were provided with copies of the minutes. Are there any corrections or additions that need to be made?
Move the approval.
Okay, okay, motion's been made and seconded that they be approved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Sorry, who seconded that? Was that Ms. Nelson?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
For the motion carries. For the financial report, Ms. Goff, can you provide us with an
I
oral
apologize.
presentation?
Apparently the system that I printed from is having a glitch this morning. We are well on hand to get started on many of our ANCRC projects, as well as just the general setup for bills for the year type spending this that we do this early in the year. Federal grant is moving along well as well.
Yes.
We haven't had any problems getting stuff started and going and everything this year. Are there any questions about any of our ongoing projects in specific or? There's another commissioner in there.
All right.
So you said we're on track. then?
Yeah, we're on track to really get all the projects we plan to start on this year, get going and everything like that, especially the Sarah remodel.
Yes.
So we've already purchased several items for it and got some others in the works, trying to get that started and everything. Other than that, it's pretty much business as usual for the first part of the year to get all the normal monthly bills set up and everything like that. So, is there any questions?
About the statues.
Okay, director's report.
All right. First off, I will apologize slightly for the length of what I sent out to you. This is what happens when you have 3 months worth of reports and you try to edit it down to the high points edition. What I'll give in the next few minutes is a high points edition of the high points edition, if you will, out of respect for people's ability to sit still for too long, even with these comfy chairs. At any rate,
And hold your breath.
okay. I think who's back on. All right. First off, I'd like to talk about development. Folks, the agency this summer, we are able to add 3 new members. an archivist, and 2 archival assistants. One is a general assistant working with me in special projects named Wes Oliver. He is a graduate student in the public history program at UALR. He's worked for us as a contract worker, distinguished himself by his ability to get stuff done and keep a sense of humor about it. He's also worked for the Hot Springs National Park and Southwest Arkansas Regional Archives as an intern, and also has worked as a graduate assistant at the Sequoia Center. So he comes to us with experience under his belt. We're making shamefully Emery Matthews, who is apparently one of the last Masters of Liberal Arts graduates from Henderson State University, at least for the time being. She has done museum and display internships with the Clark County Historical Museum and the Huey Library at Henderson State University. We've hired her as essentially a trainee conservator because we have had no conservator on our staff for the last year. Our previous one departed. Why would he want to do an MFA at Yale after all? But at any rate, she comes in with good experience, the right attitude towards learning. She is already taking time to audit a bunch of online coursework. She's reading widely, getting instruction from our longtime curator, Julianne Crawford. She is a delight to work with, and I think she will be a really positive addition to our team. And then in the position of archivist, taking the role of intake archivist is Ms. Heather Reinold. She has joined us from the staff of UCA's Torreyson Library, where she previously has served as an assistant in the university archives under somebody, I forget who. She is almost done with her degree in library of science from San Jose State University. She comes to us as a certified archivist with other training certifications. Plus, as everybody else around here, other duties as may arise. She too is absolutely a delight to work with. She brings in both a practical professionalism and a sense of humor, and a patience with my sense of humor, which is very necessary in her job. She will be dealing with a couple of longstanding projects here, including addressing a large number of deaccessionable bound volumes that have been accumulating for some time. I won't say how many boxes we have. And so she is going to be on it. She'll also take part in a couple of major accessions that will be coming up in the next few months. So I'm glad that we have those positions filled. We also have 3 returning contract workers, all of whom got experience with us this spring and early summer. AJ Fox, Autumn Harris, and Emily Dixon, pardon me. All of whom have previous experience in archive situations, or in the case of Emily, a fresh MLS and a desire to actually get experience. So we're lucky to have them. Okay. Second item on my fancy agenda here, accessions. The one I'd like to mention is a windfall in the form of purchases from the estate of Talbot Field. The Field family and associated families, very important in the history of this summer. Roy Dudley estate sale, who had previously held an estate sale of a lot of the conventional furniture and so forth several years back from the Field family, announced a second sale that had more furniture, more household furnishings, and lots of ephemera, including documents associated with the history of the Brunner Ivory Handle Company, Hope Lumber Company, Crater of Diamonds State Park, a portion of which the Field family owned and operated as a tourist attraction after it didn't work out as a commercial diamond mining operation. Roy Dudley estate sales very kindly arranged a special access day for museum and library people. We came, we saw, we purchased significant quantities of material, primarily dealing with the Crater of Diamonds State Park and Brunner Ivory, as well as political memorabilia and documents to fill in holes in a couple of our existing collections. We had both staff from both here and Southwest Arkansas Regional Archives, other DAW agencies, Central Arkansas Library, and a couple of other cultural institutions. They were all in there. At one point, Stephanie Street, director of the Clinton Foundation, was there, as well as Secret Service agents, because apparently Mr. Clinton was in town that day and he was hoping to stop on by and see what he might find. However, as is often the case with Mr. Clinton, he got behind talking to somebody else. And so the last time I saw Ms. Street, she was headed out the door with a bakery box full of things on approval. She was the one who was actually having to take the stuff as I was going through the Crater of Diamonds. Here, put this over the side. A good introduction to how we work around here. Sometimes you just have to go for the documents, put them aside. And although it would have been nice to have had them just as a gift or a donation, even the opportunity to purchase them is good because it helps us fill in the history of one of our best known and I think best loved state parks. Okay. Upcoming intakes, we have several major accessions on the horizon. We've been in contact with the Governor's Mansion staff for two major groups of material. One, the plan sets for the Governor's Mansion and the addition. The First Lady, Susan Hutchinson, thought that it would be a good idea to actually have those in the state archives, have digitized plans available for those who do work on the building in the future, but actually make sure that the originals are preserved. Thank you, Mrs. Hutchinson. Also, their staff have been putting together the archives of her time as First Lady. And we will be working with them through the fall to have them as arranged as possible before we take delivery, sometime probably in December or January. Another group that we are, or another records accumulation in months to come, the records of the patients of the Boonville Tuberculosis Sanitarium. I've mentioned this to the commission earlier. The Department of Health and UAMS have gotten serious and they've found money to actually underwrite the materials and the logistics for extraction of these records. Our plan is, as soon as we can on time, we'll start making plans to send a team of our staff up there to spend between 1 and 2 weeks in the Boonville area, working in there, extracting the records from the basement room where they're currently housed, doing some appraisal notes as to their condition and so forth, reinserting records. And somebody didn't want to bother looking for where they were supposed to go in the shelves, and then boxing them and shipping them down to Little Rock, where we'll have them stored in our collections management facility for the time being. There, we'll be able to work on them in slightly better circumstances than in the unheated basement of an old hospital. And we will be able to work out with the Department of Health and UAMS procedures for providing access to those records for researchers while maintaining patient privacy standards of very high order. Those of us who will be involved with this will be taking at least basic HIPAA training, will be receiving ongoing guidance from the Department of Health as to is to make sure those records do not go away. At the same time, make sure that it's not just walk in and see if grandpa's in there. So those are some of the accessions that we either have or have coming in. There's a long list in the long version of the report, especially book titles that we have received. Arkansas titles, both from major presses and from small presses, genealogy titles, and item acquisitions, as opposed to accessions. Acquisitions in the form of a piece of equipment that we're quite excited about. The archive writer, which we were talking about before the meeting. About 2.5 years ago, when I came on board here, our curator, Julianne Crawford, said something about how we always wanted an archive writer, and she explained what it was to me. And my thought was, you're kidding. Rube Goldberg comes up with archives equipment? But conventional silver emulsion microfilm. This has real advantages in terms of storage and preservation because unlike digital records in any form, microfilm is centuries rather than decades or years stable. It does not require constant migration to new media. If you keep it dry, this qualifies as close to permanent as we can handle in this society. Also, microfilm storage costs a whole lot less even than cloud storage over the long run. And so state archive, we're fairly late to the game in terms of these things. Other state archives have had them for years, even decades. We have a fairly sophisticated one though, that has been on the market long enough so that the manufacturer says they've worked any glitches out. And the test rolls that we have shot with this using materials that we've imported digitally, as well as ones that we have created digitally, have been pretty darn impressive. The resolution is good. The exposure is good. Our microfilm crew is excited to have this to work with. This will make it possible for us to do more digital capture of materials in future. Eventually, I won't say replacing our conventional microfilm cameras, but on the other hand, those things are 50 years old or more. Eventually, they're going to go on strike. And so digital capture is probably the way of the future, and we can have our cake and eat it too using this device. Okay. Fourth item, improvements. As you know, we have been undertaking some modest improvements to our facility at Historic Washington State Park, Southwest Arkansas Regional Archives. For a 1970s grade school building, it has its limitations as a storage place for archival materials and as, in fact, a place to do research comfortably. We are trying to address that in a cautious, cost-effective way, making accommodations for patrons a little less Spartan, at the same time improving environmental conditions, improving security, and even providing drinking water for the staff and for visitors. We have the first time we have a water fountain down there. And we have actually, Jimmy insisted on this, and he was right to do it, insisted that the floor actually be cleaned for the first time in about a decade and a half. So now we have floors that are fit to walk on, water that's safe and fit to drink. We have either taken delivery on or are awaiting delivery of new furniture for patrons. We are moving the research areas out into the foyer so that, in fact, staff can have eye contact with patrons at all times rather than having to depend upon a security camera and see what's happening around the corner in another room. We are also rearranging the storage in the vault space, making better use of it. We are getting ready to order new shelving down there to accommodate more material. While at the same time, Joshua and Melissa, our capable and enthusiastic staff there, have prepared a long list of materials for deaccession, which will be submitted to the commission at the next meeting for your approval, freeing up shelf space there so we can actually keep absorbing records from the various counties of Southwest Arkansas. One feel especially strongly about, and we've talked to our IT people about this, is improving security. Lot directly in front of the entry door to the archives. We have no image of the perpetrator because it's the directly in front of the entrance is a blind spot. The cameras were set up to monitor the roadways going into the parking lot, but there's this spot in the middle there. And so somebody came in, broke into a car, liberated a coat with a wallet and credit cards in it, and took off. We are going to redress this while also improving the placement of the cameras in department's IT director is a great believer in redoing the security for the whole building, coordinating with the park staff down there because we are part of one department after all. Basically coordinating with them rather than saying, well, this is our system, this is your system. He wants an integrated security system for the whole building. So it's not as simple as simply putting up one camera. We're going to get it done. We've got some backing on this. So improvements at Sarah. Hopefully you'll have a chance to see them for yourself. We are also looking at retrofitting LED light elements into the fluorescent fixtures at NERA, the Northeast Arkansas Regional Archive. Unfortunately, the fixtures at NERA, so conversion to LED is not as simple as it was at Sarah, where the park undertook to do that, did it quickly, cheaply. It will be a little more involved at NERA, but we're going to get it done. This will yield benefits in terms of energy efficiency, in terms of cutting down ultraviolet emissions, longevity of the light bulbs, basically not having to do tube replacement every few years through there. So long-term improvements. Improvements at the archives facility here. We are looking at several. We've already undertaken one of getting telephones for our staff rather than having people running for the phone out in the workspace in the back. We're also looking at revising our security camera setup. This has been necessitated by our friends upstairs moving out of the building. And what have they been monitoring or they've been operating the system on our behalf?
The DVR that records our security cameras was being monitored and maintained by DIS, but within moving up.
Also have some dead spots, some places where there's not camera coverage, so we will be upgrading that. Also planning on revising power plug access so we can get rid of or at least minimize the number of extension cords we have running across carpet in our facility. This place was not built for wall sockets, but we're finding ways to plumb power. The ABA staff are good about this. They have a sense of humor and they understand we don't want patrons to trip for some strange reason. Okay. Next item, programs. We've had 2 programs this summer, the Black History Symposium in June. Summer Symposium, African American Religion in Arkansas, approximately 60 attendees at the Mosaic Templars Cultural Center. On the program were Black History Commissioner Walter Washington, the Reverend Edna Mack Pettigrew, who's Associate Minister at Bethel AME, and Dr. Logan Hampton, President of Lane College. Fairly well attended, although somewhat down from previous Black History symposiums done in person. We're not sure whether or not enthusiastic audience attendance in numbers that we used to see will ever quite come back. So we're trying to figure out exactly what to do with these programs. The same thing applies to the program we held in August at ASU Jonesboro, a symposium on agricultural history in Arkansas. August 6th, Stories of Survival in Arkansas's Agricultural History. We had 3 good speakers. We had an audience of somewhere between 30 and 35. We're looking at revising our schedule, also perhaps finding a different venue still in that area, hopefully adjacent to campus, because we're holding this before students and faculty. Our major audiences are actually around. Who wants to go to an academic conference in August, after all, even if it's free lunch? So we're thinking possibly see if we can schedule it later in the fall, get a larger audience, get more people involved. We will do almost anything to get people to listen to and engage with history. And so we're going to try. Okay. Other developments. We are shifting our utility from Archivist's Toolkit. This is what we've been used for basically creating our catalog of accessions and so forth over the years. It was one of the industry standards, but for many years it has not been sufficiently supported. It's not supported now. Kind of an orphan. We have switched to Archives Space. Over the next few weeks, our staff will be trained in use. The transition so far has been fairly smooth, although Heather Nelson has pointed out let us say that there's potential for mischief if you don't actually look at what you're entering, because Archive Space tends, she says, to fill in space whether or not you actually have something to put in there. We will lick this one way or the other. It's, as people like me who held on to WordPerfect and WordStar long after their sell-by date can attest, you don't have to live entirely in the past software-wise. On the other hand, I'm not giving up my manual typewriter just yet. So that is the short version.
Heather Reinhold.
Pardon me?
Heather Reinhold or
Heather Reinhold, sorry. I'm sorry. We'll get you in on this too. Did we mention compulsory archive space training for commission members? My apologies. But at any rate, are there any questions?
Are there still some unfilled positions that y'all are working on?
There are positions. I think we don't strictly speaking.
Strictly speaking, no.
No. We could use more people.
There are needed positions.
Right. This has been, let us say, an ongoing conversation between myself and a couple of our staff members who keep saying, but wait, they took another position. We don't have it now. And so forth. Over the years, there have been agencies. My approach is let's see what we can fill for the positions we have. And right now we are at what should be a full staff, and I'm thankful for that. As I point out, historians, what do they look for in a fine restaurant? The help wanted sign. So those of us who are archivists and historians, we should be happy to be able to have our own jobs and to offer such positions as arise to our colleagues, because we don't want them in the restaurant help wanted line either.
Thank you. And then I did see the Black History Commission recently announced the recipients of their awards, their grants. I saw.
Yes, they did. I don't have that information in front of me.
They actually gave out 4 grants at the last meeting.
Good,
Mhm.
good. Yeah.
But on
the events,
Mhm.
do you have a marketing plan, a social media strategy, PR, all that? Thinking about like getting,
We have
Not to
some,
be
we
blunt, but
don't have a
that's-
plan. We have a public information officer.
Put me on the spot.
This is Lindsay Tugman, who's our public information officer, part of the shared services, which does publicity, which does outreach and marketing for the whole department. And we do advertising through social media. We email. How do we reach out, Lindsay?
For particular events like that happen outside of the Central Arkansas area.
Yeah.
What we did with both Nira and Sarah's events, we of course published it on our Facebook pages, the archive social media pages, and then we shared it to any kind of historical society Facebook page that I could find, which aren't many, but I tried to share the event there. And then I took kind of a brief press release on the event and I sent it to targeted news agencies in the area, like the Jonesboro Sun, the university itself, our ASU, and I sent it to radio stations. And it did get on some public calendars up there. I put them on any public calendar I could find, and in historic Washington area as well. I sent that to targeted newspapers, radio stations, and things like that. And then, of course, the agents, Nira and Sarah themselves, tried to do as much as they could. And it's hard to promote something when you're here to a different location. But again, like what Dr. Ware said, it's still kind of a weird post-COVID, but COVID's still here. So the hybrid events sometimes work when they're both on Zoom and in public. But again, you're splitting your audience. So it's kind of like where you want to put all your money into. So we're still trying to figure it out. And it's not just archives events that have been struggling with in-person attendance. I've had other agencies as well struggle with attendance. And I think it's just trying to convince the public, like, these are events worth coming out for. But again, you can't convince someone to do something that they're not. So I don't know if it's not getting it out there or if the public's just not responding. I'm still working on the best way. But we did everything that I could think of. And I'm always welcome to suggestions or any contacts or any way, like, oh, you know what? I know someone with, the Memphis area news agencies or something, anything to help us get the word out.
One thing that I've noticed is that in both my work email inbox and my personal email inbox, there are far too many invitations for me to be able to answer, far too many events. Basically, even before COVID, there were a lot of events, a lot of online events and so forth, as well as in-person events. And they all sort of fade into the sort of gray area of stuff would be nice to do, but I don't have time to do this. And my thought is that to get your promotion to pop out of that gray area, to say, oh yeah, this is the one you have to go to. And you'll keep plugging at it. But a lot of this at this point relies on going through channels, I think, other than just sending out an email blast. Works, which unfortunately include historical societies, which are winking out or only now coming back into some sort of activity after a 2-year and more hiatus. Historical societies, which tend to be led by folks of my age bracket, who are a little slower perhaps than younger folks to resume that kind of activity. So it's something we just have, we'll keep pecking at until we find something that works consistently. Controversial sounding symposium titles. Who knows? Get them in expecting something else, and then, okay, we've got 3 agricultural history papers. Yeah. Think of the possibilities, though. Sin, Sex, and Soil, Communities of East Arkansas.
See, now I was gonna say we need to make it hot and sexy, and I wasn't gonna say that. Since you just went there, I'm just gonna
And
add it in there.
topics are a big deal.
We do need to make history hot and sexy, though. I
Needs
mean,
to be
it
appealing.
bears repeating, not to make any of us uncomfortable, but the truth is that the young people are interested in history, but we've got to figure out how to reach them. And that can be really challenging and difficult. And I don't, your job is really, really hard, especially in a post-COVID world. But if there's, I would love to volunteer, but I'm going to volunteer the commissioners that if you can let us know when there are events, like an early onset, that if we're in the area for whatever purpose, that we could help attend. And not that we're rock stars or anything, but that we could help use our networks or at least attend and be in the area. And
That
so-
would be great. Thank you very much.
And create a video game.
Video game.
I know, right? Make it a level to unlock. Every speech you listen to is a level.
Yeah,
unlock
your
for
level
something.
goes up.
We could also invite
You get
Sam.
more golden doors.
Coach Pittman there, that would be good.
Ooh.
You mentioned somebody made the news this morning.
Hmm?
You mentioned somebody made the news this morning.
Oh, I don't know.
KTHV's website has an interview with Dr. Ware on it from yesterday.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you
About
talk-
Arkansans versus Arkansasians.
Yeah, Arkansans and Arkansasians.
And Arkansians, which is technically the earlier term.
Any other questions? Commissioners? Dr. Browning?
He had to leave.
He had a
He
great
had to-
presentation. He had.
Okay, so we'll pass on that then. On to old business. Any old business from the commission? Okay, for new business, the monument submission, we have one application before the commission seeking a waiver under the Arkansas State Capitol Historical Monument Protection Act of 2021. As part of the application review process by this commission, the chair will recognize the spokesperson for the city of Fort Smith for up to 5 minutes to provide a summary of the written application. Following this presentation, my intent is to open the floor for public comments specific to the pending application. So accordingly, I ask for a motion from a commissioner to allow the commission to open the meeting at the appropriate time for comments limited to the pending application with the condition that each speaker is limited to 2 minutes. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
So the motion is approved. Do I have a motion to bring the application of waiver from the city of Fort Smith to the floor?
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Do I have a request for discussion?
Motion for discussion.
Okay. Mr. Rowe, will you please introduce yourself and make your remarks?
Yes, thank you, sir. Good morning to all the you commissioners, and I appreciate your time and attention this morning. My name is Colby Rowe. I'm an attorney from Fort Smith here today on behalf of the city of Fort Smith. And as an aside, as a graduate nearly 2 decades ago of Arkansas Tech University, having majored in history, it's nice to see Dr. Tarver again. It's been some time. Also with us today, though, via Zoom, is the city administrator for the city of Fort Smith. That's Mr. Carl. The documents I've submitted with respect to the city's request for a waiver under the Arkansas State Capitol and Historical Monument Protection. The historical monument that we are dealing with, the city of Fort Smith is dealing with and is presented to you today, is a flag display of 7 flags that the city of Fort Smith erected at its Riverfront Park in 2001. And those 7 flags were an acknowledgement of the 7 flags that had flown over the Fort Smith area since the late 17th century. And the materials in your agenda packet identifies those 7 flags specifically. In addition to the flags, on each of the flagpoles of that monument, there was a brass marker that identified the flag. And there was a 8-inch by 12-inch plaque that gave information about when that flag flew over the area and the entity involving the flag. In April of 2020, fast forward 19 years after the display was erected, repaired, replaced, and the city of Fort Smith's Parks Department began to survey those flags and make efforts to secure replacements. And in April of 2020, all of the flags were removed from that subject display on Riverfront Park. Because of the climate at the time, I should note, and you know, one of the flags in the display is the Confederate States of America flag. And it is not the battlefield flag of the Army of Virginia, General Lee's battlefield flag. It's the Circle of Seven Stars flag. But at that time, when the city took those flags down, it had difficulty procuring a replacement for that flag. The manufacturer it had sought to order from didn't make it anymore. And there was difficulty in trying to get a replacement for that flag. In June of 2020, the city administrator, Mr. Gefkin, replacement flags. And additionally, the concern of the city of Fort Smith is the historical associations with the Confederate denied that some have issue with those type of imagery, and the city desires not to put the subject display, which includes that flag, back on its property. Instead, what the city would like to do is replace that subject display with the flags of the branches of the military, and as well as the United States of America flag. As further background, just for your information, in June or July of 2021, a lawsuit was filed against the city of Fort Smith, asserting that the city had violated the Historical Monument Protection Act by failing to reinstall this flag display. And that local court in Sebastian County held that even though the city's act commission. And that's why I'm here. So we are seeking a waiver. The city is seeking a waiver with respect to that display. And we're seeking a waiver from this body as to the disposition of that display. And the city would propose to donate that subject display to the Fort Smith Museum of History. And so that's what the city would propose, and that's what we're requesting of this body. If I can answer any questions, I'd be happy to do so.
Okay, thank you. Since everyone basically is behind me, Dr. Ware, I'm going to allow you to be the selector there and the time.
We have a sign-in sheet. Now, has anybody that wishes to speak signed in on the sign-in sheet back there? All right.
And if you would, say your name and your city for those that are on the Zoom.
Okay. Looks like we just have 4 speakers for a guest.
My understanding is you'd like the folks who are here in person to go first, and then
Yes,
entertain
please.
comments from the folks who are online who wish to speak.
Yes, please. 2 minutes.
Okay. First up is Mr. Loy Mock.
My chair here.
Let me scoot here by you.
Please stand, sir.
Sir. Hello, I'm Lloyd Mock, Bismarck, Arkansas, High Spring County. I am simply requesting that the intent of the Historical Monument Protection Act be conducted in pursuance of said act, meaning in the manner of. The third word is codified law protection, basically defines its intent and should be administered in purity and truth. The purpose of this law is to prevent the temporary occupants of their elected positions to determine which history is to be preserved and which history is to be purged forevermore. Because they say so. It is not their history to change, erase, or sanitize. I repeat, it is not their history to change, erase, or sanitize. History is not there for us to like or dislike. It is there for us to learn lessons based on what we have been and what we want to be. That being said, there's nothing morally, historically, or constitutionally wrong with the Fort Smith flag display. I'd like to further add that enemies of the flag do not dictate what they stand for or symbolize. If that was the case, the American flag would have been taken down a long time ago. The enemies of that flag dictate what it symbolized. Our American history was preserved to us from all previous generations, from 1607 Jamestown. Our posterity. It's not for anyone to abolish, as it belongs to all of us, and most certainly not to the temporary occupants of the elected positions, which is the basis.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next.
Next up is Mr. Robert Freeman. If you wish to remain sitting, you can, sir.
Good morning. I'll simply add a bit to what Loy Mock has said. How many times have we been here to the state capitol to argue over an issue or something that has a Confederate relationship? 5, 6, 7 times over the years. This onslaught that has been perpetrated these last few years against anything Confederate has all been sparked by certain instances in our social order, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Right here in Little Rock, that beautiful bronze statue that was in front of the museum for many years, which they didn't know was bronze until they took it down to repair it. They thought it was stone. I thought it was stone. Turns out to be a magnificent bronze statue. It's in storage here somewhere in Little Rock. If it's ever to be put back again, it's an original. Our ancestors paid a lot of money for it. Their ancestors died for it. And I wish to say simply this. Whether it's a flag display in Fort Smith, Arkansas, or a statue in Little Rock, Arkansas, or on the Triangle in Hot Springs, Arkansas, at Central in Ouachita, which the UDC has owned since about 1920. The statue went up in 1934, the last one in Arkansas. These monuments and these relations with various things such as flags, the name of a park, the name of a street, the name of a county in Arkansas. Mr. Mock went through that some years ago. How many counties in Arkansas are named after Confederate personages?
Time, Mr. Freeman.
33?
Time, Mr. Freeman.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
Eliminating these one by one?
Sir, time.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I'll tell you what we'll wind up with nothing. We'll wind up with nothing.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
in the
Mr.
history of
Freeman.
Arkansas.
Mr.
So
Freeman.
I am against what they propose in Fort Smith.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Next up is Mr. Joey McCutcheon.
Thank you.
McCutcheon?
Thank you, members of the commission. My name is Joey McCutcheon, Fort Smith, Arkansas. I brought the lawsuit against the city. The purpose of the Arkansas Heritage Division is to preserve and to promote Arkansas culture and heritage. Words are important, but actions are critical. You're going to send a message today, one way or another, about whether you're serious about preserving and promoting Arkansas cultural heritage. The law is clear and the rules are clear. They're unambiguous and they're objective. Is the Fort Smith flag display a historical monument? By definition, in the act and in the rules, it is. Judge DeLay found also that to be. Has Fort Smith attempted to remove or rededicate the flag display in violation of the law? Unequivocally, yes. The act says and the rules state an historical monument shall not be removed or rededicated. Fort Smith claiming that this is for military purposes is an afterthought and a deception. That wasn't the purpose. We've got a military park in downtown Fort Smith, Arkansas on Garrison Avenue that we totally support flags at that position. Has the city met the clear, objective, and unambiguous criteria for a waiver. And those are only to install, relocate, prepare, or alter a public infrastructure. I repeat that again. It is clear what the purpose of this act is, and it states so in the rules: to install, relocate, repair, or alter a public infrastructure. That is not the purpose here. The purpose of the city of Fort Smith is to do away with and rededicate a flag display, which we already have on Garrison Avenue in Fort Smith, Arkansas. So I ask you to.
Thank you, Mr. McCutcheon.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Never enough time.
Mr. Mark Johnson. Senator?
Thank you, Dr. Ware. Commission, my friend, Commissioner Fuller.
Senator, how are you?
Long time no see. So, I'll be very brief. I'm the author of Act 1003, and I'm here to preserve what Act 1003 says. And as Mr. McCutcheon stated, it's quite clear. Code 22-3-2104. A historical monument shall not be relocated, vandalized, damaged, destroyed, removed, altered, renamed, rededicated, or otherwise disturbed. I put the waiver process in the act because we needed to have a way for conflicting governmental interests, such as widening a road, repairing a broken water main, dealing with similar infrastructure issues in a way that would be done respectfully, but would also recommend the problems that come before any county, municipality, or any entity that needs to deal with their property. We've seen cemeteries even relocated to build highways. There's a method to do this, but to allow political correctness or anything to be one of those criteria was specifically excluded in the law. Now, I put this, when I crafted the law, I put this responsibility with your commission because you have wise people with a perspective of history that understand that. But we did not set out to abrogate our responsibility as lawmakers, nor to assign that to a third party appointed by the executive branch. So understand, the law is clear. The law is there's a good reason for waivers. None of those reasons were met or any way brought up by the city of Fort Smith. In fact, they have in effect stipulated to the fact that this is ceding to political correctness. So I urge you to deny this request for waiver. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, sir.
Very good.
All right, to everybody online, if there is someone there who wishes to speak for or against the measure that we are up for consideration, if you will please click the little raise your hand like Mr. Sir Thompson up here has figured out. Then we'll be able to get a hold of you to speak. Is there anybody besides Mr. Thompson up here that wishes to speak that's on the Zoom meeting? You'll need to unmute yourselves to speak. All right, looks like the only person that's raised their hand is Mr. Thompson up here.
Yes.
Yes.
So we'll recognize him? Okay.
Mhm.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Thompson.
Let me thank you for this opportunity to speak to the commission. I really, really appreciate your work. My name is Philip Thompson. I'm a native of Fayetteville. My family's been here 200 years, since well before our statehood in 1836. Let me just first say that this mentioned by the representative of Fort Smith that, well, gee whiz, we just couldn't find a flag anywhere, so we had to tear it down. It's disingenuous and it's ludicrous, and it should be dismissed out of hand. Let me also mention the ordination of law. We're not, this is not the Taliban sweeping through Afghanistan and tearing everything down that offends them, such as, UNESCO World Heritage Site. The world wants to come here. If if a waiver is granted here, it's a complete travesty of justice. It means that, well, it means that laws don't mean anything. I know I only have 2 minutes. I just wanted to say that without any question whatsoever, this waiver should be denied out of hand. And I also respectfully suggest that it would be appropriate to consider bringing legal charges against the people of the Fort Smith government who are involved with this. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Is there anyone else?
Is there anyone else?
It's the top one.
Oh, there.
Are there any who we can't see on the screen?
Is there anybody else on the screen that, or on the Zoom link that wishes to speak at the meeting? You will need to unmute your computer for us to hear you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do you have questions then for the Mr. Rowe for the on the
Yeah,
application?
Mr. Chairman, are we asking questions, Mr. Rowe and the other speakers, or are we just limiting to Mr. Rowe here at this point?
Probably just for the application, so it'd be Mr. Rowe.
Mr. Rowe, I read your, I'm kind of a semi-historian, I guess. But I had a question in reading the application, and the gentleman actually up here brought it up a little bit. One of your reasons in that was he couldn't find a flag. Well, I looked on the internet this morning, and there are thousands of companies make all kinds of flags. Everything from that 7-star Confederate flag to the stars and bars. Who made that decision that you couldn't, the flags were all worn out and you couldn't find flags to replace them, whether it was the Confederate flag or any of the others?
Sure.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. The Parks Department is the department in the city of Fort Smith that surveyed those flags initially in the spring of 2020. It would have been that department who was tasked with trying to find replacement flags. And, I don't know the extent of the.
They've got computers over there, don't they?
Oh, they've got
Google other
computers.
stuff. Okay.
So it'd been the Parks Department that would have been tasked with finding those replacement flags.
They couldn't find one. They're telling the city of Fort Smith leadership,
my materials point out, they did eventually find replacement flags. They had difficulty in the initial procurement process of replacing some of those flags. But as we note, replacement flags have been obtained.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rowe, I have a couple of questions. You state in the application that it's the desire of the city of Fort Smith to donate the display to the Fort Smith Museum of History.
Yes, sir.
Do you have or can you provide Fort Smith Museum of History will accept the donation?
I don't have that with me today. Mr. Gefkin may be able to speak on it. I think there has been, and I should preface that there has been communications with that entity, but I don't think there's been any, formal resolutions or sought by that museum at this stage, unless Mr. Gefkin has different information.
Because to me, that's something that I would not, in a way, you're kind of the guinea pig. You're the first applicant here. And I think that's something that I would want to see in an application, and any subsequent applications that any other entity would provide. I would want, if they're wanting to donate, I would want to see the donation agreement and as part of the application or supporting material, and that what the person or entity to whom is going to be donated, what they plan to do with it. Okay?
Is Mr. Gaffney up here so he can answer anything?
Yes, absolutely. It has been discussed with board members of the Fort Smith Museum of History. Our police chief is also on that board, and the mounting hardware to place the flags on the exterior of the building is still there. We do not have it a written agreement, but that can be of that board.
Okay, I have additional question. Who or what individual or what body within the government of the city of Fort Worth made the decision that they did not wish to reinstall the flags at the Riverfront Park?
That would be me as city administrator. This had been discussed going back to before the election of Mayor McGill with Mayor Sanders. And when the flags, as they are replaced periodically, were tattered due to weather, which does happen, the decision was made to not reinstall them. We held on to them in April of 2020. And then subsequently, as was stated, this is nothing new. The decision based on the F-35 project, and as that was starting, was to place the flags of the 6 branches of the military and the United States flag at that location. Subsequent came the lawsuit, so we have not done anything at this time.
Okay, and then I have one, I guess, final question or comment along the same line. You state that that many people in your community find historical association with the Confederacy emotionally charging and potentially provocative. I think that as part of the application, there should be some evidence to substantiate that statement.
I can definitely get that. I mean, that does start with our mayor, Mayor George McGill, down through community leaders and church leaders of varying demographic backgrounds. If the commission would like that, I can definitely ask those leaders and their parishioners and friends to provide such statements.
Question, Senator Johnson, you worked on this bill over there for quite some time. How substantially did that thing pass the House of Representatives?
It had an emergency clause, and so it was at least 67 votes. Okay. I think we got slightly more than that. I apologize for not knowing that.
That's quite all right. And how did it do in the Senate?
It also had a 2/3 majority. I think it had 24 or 5 votes out of 35 in the Senate.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Actually, do you have that marked?
Yes, ma'am, I do. Let me share that with you.
Somebody brought up relocate versus rededicate. Somebody testified.
It's highlighted there. Yes.
Okay. It has both.
Both of those.
That's all I had. I wanted to clarification.
Could I speak to the replacement of the flag,
That's at the discretion of the chair.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay, briefly.
Yes, sir. With regard to replacement of the flag, that's just a total deception and it's not true. First of all, we have a first national flag up at the Sebastian County Courthouse, which Bob Pennybacker replaces every time that the flag gets tattered and torn. They knew where the flags were. They had access to flags. They could have gotten a flag from me or anybody else. It's just a red herring like the other arguments. The other argument is this military, because we're bringing in the F-35 project, now we're gonna somehow put up, we're totally in favor of military flags. And we wholly support that, and I'll help the city pay for the flag poles if they need that, to put up the flags on Garrison Avenue, Mr. Gefkin.
Thank you. Mr. Rowe, you had stated that the replacement flag has been acquired though at this point, correct?
That's correct, Dr. Tarver.
Mr. Andrews, a legal question for you. Is it the determination then of the Division's Council that the application complies with the requirements of Act 1003?
For the record, I am Jim Andrews. I am General Counsel for Arkansas Parks, Heritage, and Tourism. The department has three major divisions, one of which is Heritage, under which Arkansas State Archives is housed. Arkansas State Archives provides what we call the staff and administrative support for the Arkansas History Commission. So I just wanted to put that on the record, make it clear the interrelationships here. As to the documents that guide this commission on this particular matter, we have codified, let's see, I should know it by rote. Arkansas Code annotated 22-3-2101 at sequence. We also have the rules that act required this commission to promulgate, and those rules were properly promulgated under the Arkansas Administrative Procedure Act and approved by the Arkansas Legislative Council. With regard to the application, that's where we look to is the rules and whether the application met the requirements of the rules. On that would have been staff's review with State Archives. Dr. Ware, do you have a comment on?
Yes, I and members of our staff reviewed the application and compared it with the rules, the requirements for submission. We found that it was complete and correct as far as we could ascertain. And so I concluded with the concurrence of my staff who had also examined the same material that there was no obstacle that we could see to approval of this waiver. The application was complete and done right.
So it meets all the necessary requirements.
According to staff's review and comment for an application.
Right. Any other questions?
I have a question for.
Yes.
Again, is under the rules as they exist. If a waiver application is denied, can it be resubmitted?
I don't see anything that would preclude that.
Okay.
I would say it would be up to the commission's discretion whether to reconsider a denied application. On that note, the original enabling statutes of this commission, and historically, this commission has performed only advisory functions until we had the passage of Act 1003. But Arkansas Code annotated 13-3-103B does say that this commission may adopt and modify rules for the conduct of its business. So as long as those rules do not conflict with the statute and do not conflict with the rules regarding what was required to be promulgated under the statute, the commission may operate as it deems best.
Question. Under number of agencies, the staff, the decision can, be appealed, certainly be appealed back to the board. And then I know Agri and ABC and some others can be appealed to circuit court. Are our decisions appealable to court at this time? Do we know?
I'm glad that you asked that question. Under the enabling statute, Act 1003, It did not create any kind of adversarial proceeding here. This is not a legal proceeding. It's basically an Arkansas History Commission meeting. And whatever decisions that are made here today can be taken to the circuit court. If it's based on some legal argument that this commission did not operate lawfully in reaching its decision. So that would be the appeal, if you will, going to the circuit court. There wouldn't necessarily be an appeal or an appeal process back to this commission.
So the fact you're saying they can't appeal to say that we made the wrong decision. They have to say we made it and we didn't make it in a correct fashion.
We somehow violated law would be the basis for a court action.
Okay. So if we're going to allow, let's say we make a decision one way or the other, and somebody wants to appeal that, are we going to have to get that read into our rules and regs? We don't have that now, do we? Somebody's going to have to make a motion that allows a group to come do that. To come back to the commission.
To reconsider?
Yeah, reconsider.
I would say yes, you would have to go through some kind of motion process at your meeting and adopt that for record.
So in a sense, the applicant kind of has the right to appeal without having to go to court by simply resubmitting.
The applicant could resubmit. I don't see anything that precludes that,
Right,
but again,
yeah,
it
so
would be
if
the
we-
History Commission's
Right.
decision whether or not to reconsider something on which it's already made a decision.
I think that's fair and for anybody on either side. So would you accept a motion to that effect that we create something like that?
To allow for reapplication.
That's effectively a new application.
Yes.
I should say also that part of the application process, applicants are free to ask for comments on their applications. When we received an application, when we received the application from the city of Fort Smith some weeks ago, we sent it back to Mr. Rowe. Saying no, this, and in the end, they submitted a complete application, and that is meant to assist applicants to make sure they actually have their ducks in a row when they submit their material to the commission for consideration. Cannot eliminate shortfall, but we can certainly try to spot them before the submission for your consideration.
So, Mr. Rowe, in a sense, your application then is to relocate the flags to the Fort Smith Museum of History?
Well, I didn't term it that way. I'm proceeding under subsection E of 22 3-2104. And that subsection says that a governmental entity shall request a waiver from the Arkansas History Commission for a historical monument that previously has been removed, but is still in the possession of the governmental entity to determine the disposition of the historical monument under subdivision F1. And then subdivision F1 lists 3 or 4 possibilities that this commission can consider with respect to disposition of that monument. So that our request, the city of Fort Smith doesn't operate that museum. It's a private entity. So it's, we could call it a relocation, but it's, the city would donate it, the title and ownership of it to that private entity.
So in essence, what you're trying to avoid A1 by saying that it was, in essence, are you saying that it was, since it was already in the process of being referred, for lack of a better word, that's giving you the ability to apply under F1?
That's what the circuit court held in our local litigation. It said the city must proceed, even though it removes this monument, this flag display, addresses those situations such as that. And this was the local court ruling, and said, go to the History Commission and seek your waiver. And as to that monument that was previously moved, but still within the governmental entity's possession.
Nobody's filed a lawsuit over that to say you can't make the thing retroactive at this point.
That, to my knowledge, has not been litigated.
I didn't think so.
Or that was grandfathered.
Yeah.
I think that's
the deal.
that's the rub for, is that you're, because it was already out, you're applying it, and this was not grandfathered.
Yeah.
As somebody who's in an industry where everything is grandfathered, that's really where that's where I have probably the second biggest problem with the request. Is just that you're trying to circumvent what's actually in here.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Johnson, I believe.
Mr. Chairman, I could address that point that was just raised.
Okay.
Suspension of the rules.
You want a motion on that?
In the period we went through to craft this legislation, we dealt with exactly at hand, not necessarily with the Fort Smith flag display in mind, but when if a monument had been removed that would violate this act, then we defined a monument as something that even if it were removed and still in possession of that entity, that it is a monument for all the other purposes of the act. Now, referring to, I want to make sure she understands that's not what this case is, but when you have, if for example, Fort Smith had taken down all the plaques and monuments, torn it down, gave it away, held a public auction, got rid of it long before passage of Act 1003, then that might very well have be an ex post facto law if you say, no, you've got to go back and find that stuff. We know that's unreasonable. Bad things happen, but we can't make the law retroactive. That violates the Constitution. But if that entity has it sitting in a warehouse or somewhere else located, it's theirs, they just pulled it down. Then we crafted the legislation to say it is a monument for all the other purposes of this act. Now, that's an important point to realize, that when we say all the things that what you can't do to the monument, it applies to the one that's in the closet as well as the one that's outside the City Hall or courthouse. So I just want to clarify that point. I went down this road in anticipation of these very things because the bill was pending for some time, and I could just see people trying to make an end run on it or get around it before it took effect. To wit, the reason I added the emergency clause, and I think everyone that's involved knows it, I added the emergency clause as an amendment because of the desire of some people to take the statue of Senator Fulbright down at Old Main at the University of Arkansas. And we put that in to make the bill effective at that time before the people who wanted to rewrite history got their say on the campus of the University of Arkansas. So this applies, the law applies to this flag display, even though it was taken down prior to the passage of the act. But clearly, and the highlighted information that it's in the statute there that I gave you, that's the first thing. A monument protected by Act 1003. And respectfully, it is not within the jurisdiction of this commission to overturn the law in proper way. But the reason we have you here is to allow for reasonable ways to deal with some conflicting governmental problem like a road needing to be widened, or a tornado came through, or a water main breaks. And we put in a temporary waiver where they can just more or less, I hope, call up Dr. Ware and say, hey, we had this water break.
Yep.
Can we have a few days to take it down, and send them a fax and say, of course, you're covered. We have a blanket rule from this commission, and I hope y'all would do that. Would keep city or county from using that waiver process to basically absolutely obliterate the purpose of the law. And that is exactly what we have Mr. Rowe arguing today. And he even stipulates to some of the activities in 2020 when there was a movement to destroy anything that had anything to do with South or Southern culture or the Confederacy.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, sir.
Go ahead. Yeah. Ask the
My
question
last
also.
one. So as a point of clarification, in anticipation that you had statues or historical monuments that were already in a warehouse somewhere, to your earlier point, they could keep them in that warehouse and not put them back up. Nothing, they're not forced.
No, ma'am.
Okay, so can you speak to that briefly?
Well, it's not there, Mr. Chairman, respectfully. It's still a monument. It's as much a real monument is there as it would be if it were standing on its pedestal. It's in the warehouse. It should be restored to its proper place. Now, there may be a logistical reason. For example, someone mentioned the statue in Little Rock at MacArthur Park. Construction is going on for the Museum of Fine Arts. If it was closer to that building, it needed to be moved or taken down for protection while this other construction is going on, there's cranes there. That would be an example of y'all would grant a waiver for that, and hopefully that you would. That's what that's for. But this, we, the General Assembly did not, in the language of this act, assign an arbitrary and capricious right to this commission to decide what's a monument, what should be okay and what should not.
So Senator, the way the law is written, the flags were taken down before the law was passed, correct?
They were still in the possession of the city.
Right, but they were not on display, I guess is my question. So
my understanding.
All right, and the law does not force the city of Fort Smith to put them back up, correct? But it prevents them without a waiver from disposing of the flags, but it doesn't require that they put them back up.
In my opinion, it does require that they restore it to how it was because it was still in their possession. Now, there might be modifications to that, but to simply say we're going to change the purpose for which these flags were dedicated. And I think that's important to note. Not well, we're going to put up a flag with Mickey Mouse and Goofy and Donald Duck, but we still got the flag. That would be totally different from the original purpose for which it was dedicated. And that's why it is a violation for them to sit on these flags, which are part of the monument, and to try to repurpose that location for something that's outside the purview. I think I covered it pretty well in Act 1003, and I depend on the commission not to undo what the legislature clearly acted.
What the commission is doing or is being asked to do is to say yay or nay to the application. All that does is say, you can't do we're not going to give you a waiver to do what you've requested to do. If you don't want to put it back up, that's on you. And if somebody objects to that, they take you to court. Correct? We're not telling them to put the flag display back up. We don't have that authority.
Correct.
All we're doing is say, you can't do what you've asked to do in this application.
Right.
If you don't want to put the thing back up, that's on you. and that's not our problem.
Correct. And per Act 1003, any resident of Arkansas has got standing to sue for that violation.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, as general counsel, I feel out of fairness and complete transparency, I have got attorneys in this room that will disagree with what I'm about to say, and I've got attorneys in this room who will agree with what I'm about to say. But in my opinion, and I won't get into the legalities here, it is within the commission's province to either approve the application or deny the application. Also, if it were to approve or deny, to impose conditions or stipulations on the approval or the denial. So it is within the commission's province to say yay or nay to.
Take public comments, I think. All right, do we have a motion to bring the application to question to vote?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, so the motion is to.
I guess the motion would need to be made is to approve or to
Right.
deny the waiver.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So the motion is to approve the application for waiver under the Arkansas State Capitol and Historical Monument Protection Act of 2021 by the city of Fort Smith. So all in favor of approving the waiver, say aye. I vote in favor. All opposed?
I'm going to vote present. I would, can I make a substitute motion?
I would say, let's deal with the
Yeah,
motion that's
that's-
currently on the floor first. I don't have my Robert's Rules of
Yeah,
Order present.
So
So we have a
we have
motion.
one in favor of the waiver, two opposed,
And one
and one present.
In per Act 1003, the majority vote of those present is the act of the commission.
So the motion, the waiver is not approved.
If the vote is two opposed, one in favor, and one abstain, that would be correct.
So the waiver is not approved. Now, is there?
Well, you can't.
I can't do
You can't
substitute
make,
motion.
you can't make a
Majority either
substitute
way.
motion.
Yeah.
But you can, well, depends on what the motion, you can make a motion that the application be resubmitted.
Well, I don't, it's
Well,
not
that's
up to,
up
it's
to
not up to me
That's
to
up to
make a
everybody
motion to,
But
It sounds like
we're-
Dr. Ware said.
But we're
that-
gonna need a motion to reconsider an
we
application.
would, at
for
the
same.
time that it came in.
I'll make that motion that should they wish to should any party wish to resubmit an application, they'd be allowed to do so.
And I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Ms. Nelson seconded that.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, any other new business? All right, next item on the agenda is to confirm the date and time of the next meeting. This will be December or January.
December.
December.
Right now, the plan is to have it. Let me double check here. The 15th of December.
That's his job.
December.
All right, the 15th of December, and right now our plan is to have it at the Sarah Archives at Historic Washington State Park.
Okay,
So hopefully for you guys to see the new improvements.
I did have under my notes here for new business to note that this will be our last meeting via Zoom. That we will be back in person meetings after this meeting. So December 15th.
Also, this might be a good time to discuss, we have started looking at some locations around the state because you also expressed the wish for the
Right.
commission to start crowding back around to the outlying areas.
Okay.
We have looked at locations such as the Dias Community Center up at where the Johnny Cash home is and stuff as well. Possibly Port Plantation down in the southwest, southeast part of the state. Also looking at several of the state parks have meeting facilities that we can use at various locations around the state as well.
It would be, those first two would be interesting. We could tie in with Arkansas State University since
Yes.
their history department and
Yeah, December we're
Yes.
meeting at Sarah.
And so we're looking at then March and June, trying to figure out the locations.
Yeah, when we have the next meeting, I'll have a list of locations that I've hashed out with them, make sure they have facilities big enough to handle our meetings. And that you guys will be able to select from for your 2023 meetings.
If I know the folks at the Sultana Museum have, I'm kind of involved with that a little bit, and they've reached out, asked me to tell the commission that would love to have everybody up that way sometime. They'll put on a good show for us.
I would love to do that.
You wouldn't that be neat? Yeah.
Okay.
They're raised, I think they've raised $6 or $7 million already toward the institute.
Do you know if they have a large meeting room up there?
They're in the old gym of a high school right now with a lot of the activities, but I can get you some more information on it if you'd
Then
like.
we'll contact them, find a place in the area.
That'd be an interesting one to go to.
Just
Yes,
I agree.
the meeting will
If
be
you
at
choose-
10 a.m. again.
if you choose dice, caution people, don't rely on your GPS to get you. Because you will be going down gravel roads.
I have just had firsthand experience with that, trying to get up there for a concert a couple of weekends ago. The only time I've been as lost is when I relied on GPS to get to Arkansas Post.
That's a bad one.
But getting the dice, relying on your GPS
Right.
is an
To
adventure.
confirm then our next that out, as well as the written financial spreadsheet as well.
As soon as I get to Purnell.
All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. See you in December.
Sure.
Yeah,
Certainly. Oh, yeah.
Hello?
I just don't think I saw.
Yeah.
Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service, sir.
You know.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, first.
I can see your job.
Thank you all, appreciate you.
Can't keep going off on tangents. If we could, we could get through sessions. Big deal. My deal is this co-op throwing up these roadblocks. It's illegal.